Early Thursday morning, Speaker Mike Johnson secured a significant legislative victory, successfully navigating internal party rifts to push through a controversial tax and spending bill aligned with President Donald Trump's agenda. Despite days of turmoil and intense intra-party opposition, House Republicans narrowly approved the comprehensive package by Johnson's self-imposed Memorial Day deadline. The bill, which includes major tax cuts and spending reductions, had faced resistance from various GOP factions, some demanding additional concessions until the final hours. Yet, after multiple overnight negotiation sessions and considerable pressure, the legislation passed, marking a critical win for both the Speaker and the President. "Sometimes it's good to be underestimated, isn't it?" Johnson remarked with evident fatigue but visible satisfaction, addressing the chamber after the late-night vote. Less than half a day earlier, nearly a dozen Republican lawmakers were poised to derail the package. Johnson, known for his calm demeanor, had been juggling conflicting demands, balancing pressure from hardline fiscal conservatives opposed to large tax incentives and centrists insisting those incentives remain. The divisions ran so deep that many inside the party doubted whether the bill could pass at all, especially within the ambitious timeline Johnson had laid out. Representative Richard Hudson of North Carolina, part of Johnson's leadership circle, credited the Speaker's patience and resolve as the driving force behind the outcome. "He's always calm, he's always patient. It's astonishing," Hudson said, comparing Johnson favorably to past GOP leaders. "There's a humbleness and authenticity that sets him apart." The bill contains several key elements of Trump's economic platform, including the extension of 2017 tax cuts and the removal of taxes on tips and overtime pay. It also includes billions in funding for border security, reinforcing the administration's focus on cracking down on illegal immigration. Trump played an active role in ensuring Republican unity, meeting several times with lawmakers to garner support. His direct appeals, particularly during a high-stakes meeting on Wednesday with members of the conservative House Freedom Caucus, were pivotal in turning the tide. One lawmaker familiar with the meeting said the conversation got the last 15 votes needed for passage. In exchange for their backing, some GOP holdouts secured modifications to Medicaid provisions and a rollback of clean energy tax credits introduced under the Biden administration. While they continued to express concern about the bill's overall fiscal impact, many acknowledged the strategic necessity of supporting it, with hopes of shaping it further through Senate negotiations. "It's been a long fight," said Representative Eric Burleson of Missouri. "There comes a moment when you pause and recognize what's been achieved." The future of the bill in the Senate remains uncertain, with Republican senators signaling intentions to introduce their own amendments. Nonetheless, the leadership is urging swift movement. Both Trump and Johnson have conveyed their desire to see the bill signed into law by July 4th, adding further urgency to the legislative process. Any substantial changes by the Senate could jeopardize the fragile consensus that enabled the bill's passage in the House, where Johnson had no margin for error. He ultimately lost 3 critical votes, the maximum possible without dooming the measure. Representatives Thomas Massie of Kentucky and Warren Davidson of Ohio joined Democrats in opposing the bill, while Andy Harris of Maryland, chair of the Freedom Caucus, opted to vote present. In a surprise move, one of the bill's staunchest critics, Representative Chip Roy of Texas, voted in favor at the last minute, helping tip the scale. The final tally stood at a razor-thin 215 to 214. Thursday's early morning vote marked the end of an intense and turbulent stretch for House Republicans, culminating after weeks of behind-the-scenes negotiations led by Speaker Mike Johnson. The final 72 hours were particularly critical, with closed-door meetings at both the Capitol and the White House producing a set of key revisions that eventually secured enough GOP votes for passage. The legislation, which already proposed steep reductions to major federal assistance programs like Medicaid and food stamps, also seeks to make permanent the individual income tax cuts first introduced in the 2017 tax law. These sweeping changes are designed to fulfill long-standing priorities within the Republican agenda, despite considerable internal pushback. In the final round of talks, Johnson and Trump agreed to move up the timeline for stricter Medicaid work requirements, from 2029 to the end of 2026. They also included new financial disincentives for states that choose to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, a step aimed at curbing what Republicans argue is unsustainable health care spending. Another significant change was the decision to end clean energy tax incentives implemented during the Biden administration much earlier than initially planned. While this shift was welcomed by many conservatives, it created unease among moderates, particularly those from swing districts or energy-producing states. A notable win for coastal state Republicans came in the form of an increased cap on state and local tax SALT deductions. The final version of the bill allows certain income brackets to deduct up to $40,000, a major jump from the previous $10,000 limit. GOP leadership had originally proposed a $30,000 cap, but lawmakers from high-tax states like New York, New Jersey, and California held firm, forcing the increase as a condition of their support. With the bill now cleared in the House, the focus shifts to the Senate, where its future remains uncertain. Senate Majority Leader John Thune has signaled a desire to begin deliberations promptly, though he faces similar challenges with a divided Republican conference, some of whom are heading into competitive re-election campaigns next year. Conservative House members are already pressuring Senate allies to maintain a firm stance on reducing the federal deficit. Senators such as Mike Lee, Rick Scott, and Ron Johnson are expected to be key players in that effort. Among the more contentious issues likely to be raised is a push to restructure the way the federal government funds Medicaid, a complex debate centered around formulas that critics say allow states to game the system through provider taxes and inflated reimbursement practices. "We'll be holding the line on our own red lines," said Representative Chip Roy, emphasizing the need for tighter fiscal discipline. "We can't afford to see this bill come back loaded with more deficit spending." Roy acknowledged that while the House version didn't deliver everything conservatives wanted, the Senate now has an opportunity to further tighten the legislation, especially in terms of spending controls and Medicaid reforms, which remain sticking points for fiscal hawks.